All right, everyone. So today I wanted to talk about a list of game-changing skills in Raid Shadow Legends. So this is definitely going to be a list of skills that you are going to want to be on the lookout for on various champions, and you'll notice that once you start adding these champions with these skills to your roster, you are definitely going to be achieving things in Raid Shadow Legends that you weren't able to before. Now, I'll also say this as a disclaimer here at the start. I'm sure there are plenty of things that I am missing out on, of course, but this is just as many of the different game-changing skills and abilities that I could fit into one list at once. So with that being said, let's jump into number one. Without a doubt, definitely one of the biggest, if not the biggest, game-changing skills that you can find on a champion. It's going to be huge, especially once you get to the end game, and that is going to be an area of effect counterattack skill. Now, there's not really too many champions that have an area of effect counterattack skill, which is why you'll end up hearing a lot of people say that once you do end up getting a champion that does have one of these area of effect counterattacks, you will be able to start to notice things and achieve things in Raid Shadow Legends in the end game that you were not able to before. This is definitely going to be something that you really don't need to worry too much about as a newer or intermediate player, but as you get further along into the game, this is definitely going to be a huge milestone. Now, one champion, as an example, is going to be Martir. Definitely one of the most coveted champions in Raid Shadow Legends overall. She's going to be in the Sacred Order, and here is her area of effect counterattack skill. As you can see, Bastion of Faith with a 4-turn cooldown, which can actually even be lowered down to a 3-turn cooldown with the skill book, places a 60% increased defense buff and a counterattack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So not only does it have that area of effect counterattack, but it also has an increased defense buff as well. That in combination with the fact that she has a decreased defense debuff on her auto attack and also a decreased attack debuff and a provoke debuff AoE, she's just an insane champion. Definitely, without a doubt, one of the most sought after legendaries in the game, and this counterattack is definitely going to be a game changer. She's not the only champion that has an area of effect counterattack, but there's not really a whole bunch of champions in Raid Shadow Legends that do indeed have this skill. So definitely going to be a big one. Without a doubt, has to be number one on the list. And now let's move on to number two. Now, this is going to be a really big one, specifically for the arena. It's still a very useful skill overall, but it's going to be a massive game changer for the arena, and that is going to be a turn meter fill. Now, an example of a champion that has this skill is going to be Seeker, who I actually do indeed have, and I do use him for the arena quite a bit. And the skill that we are going to be looking at is going to be Tailwind right here. So, fills the turn meter of all allies by 30%. Places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, grants an extra turn. So this skill obviously has a lot going on for it. In addition to that turn meter fill, he also has an area of effect increased attack buff on all allies, grants an extra turn, which means that this skill doesn't even actually occupy his turn because he gets to go again right after, and it also kind of hiddenly reduces the cooldown of this skill down to 2 turns, which means that you can pretty much always keep this increased attack buff going. So very powerful skill overall, and the turn meter fill is going to be huge specifically for the arena because, again, the goal in the arena is you want to go first. You want to have as many of your team members go first when you can, because you want to be the one to apply all the buffs, all the debuffs, all the utility. You want to be the ones to do everything before your opponent's team gets to do everything, because if they get to apply all their buffs, debuffs, not only do you risk them actually straight up killing your team right away, but also, even if they don't kill your team right away, now that they've applied all their buffs, debuffs, and everything, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to end up killing them, and you're just going to overall do way less damage to them if they're going first compared to you. So it also draws out the length of the battles. Huge advantage in the arena to going first, which is why you're going to want to build champions with that turn meter fill type skill with lots of speed so that they end up going first, and then once they end up going first, they can use their turn meter fill to fill up the meter of the rest of your team members, and then they get to go all before your opponent's team gets to go. So lots of synergy with the speed skill, the speed stat. Very important, and definitely a massive game changer for the arena. So that's going to be number 2. Now, number 3, block damage and unkillable. Now, there are a decent amount of champions that do have both block damage and unkillable, but this combination of skills is actually going to get more and more powerful as you have more members in your team that actually have this skill. and I'll explain the short reason why. So just using Sir Nicholas as an example, because I believe he's the only one that I know off the top of my head that I have where he has an unkillable skill. It's going to be on his Goodwill, places an unkillable buff and a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns, so it does have that extra continuous heal on it as well. Really nice. 4-turn cooldown. It lasts for 2 turns though, so that means that my team is going to be unkillable for 2 turns. However, for the other 2 turns, they're going to be vulnerable to damage and they're going to be vulnerable to dying. If you have more than one member on your team that has this unkillable buff, that means that you're going to be able to go more turns out of your total number of turns without taking damage or without dying, and essentially it makes this combination of skills more powerful. In fact, you can end up building a team to the point where you pretty much always have unkillable, and you can accomplish some crazy things in Raid Shadow Legends if you can end up doing this. It's not easy to do. I personally have not really experimented around with doing this, but I've heard stories of some crazy things happening once you kind of get this unkillable block damage synergy in a team to where you pretty much always have it going, and crazy things do indeed happen. So that's going to end up being number 3. Number 4, a large turn meter deplete skill. Very, very powerful for all sorts of encounters. Specifically coming to mind are going to be things like the clan boss, where you really don't want the clan boss taking a lot of turns, because the more turns he takes, the more damage ramp up he's going to get. So if you deplete his turn meter, not only does that mean that you get to actually take more turns in comparison to him, you're doing more damage, but he's also doing less damage to your team, which means you're going to stay alive longer and also end up doing more damage in the long term as well. So very powerful, even for things like dungeons. Turn meter depletes are a very, very useful game-changing skill. Now, an example of a champion that has this is going to be Rason Scarhide, which is going to be his Bog Down skill right here. Attacks all enemies, decreases the turn meter by 100%. Very powerful. This is just a fantastic skill. Not only is it a turn meter deplete, but it's also an area of effect. Rason also has some other incredibly powerful components to his skill kit. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff and a weakened debuff. Sorry. And also his auto attack is attacks one enemy 3 times, has a 20% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target. So overall, his skill kit is insane. He has 2 powerful buff debuff type skills, this strong version of decreased defense, a weaken. He also has his very powerful auto attack that removes buffs, and his area of effect decrease the turn meter by 100%. So overall, especially considering you can end up fusing Rason now, which you weren't able to when I first started the game back in April, fantastic champion with a fantastic skill kit. Definitely going to be a game changer for sure. So that's going to end up being number 4. Alright, number 5, strong skills based on max HP. Now this is one that I was debating on throwing in because it really is kind of just a damage type thing. It's not going to be utility or buffs like a lot of these other things are, but it is going to be very, very powerful because the amount of damage that you're going to be able to do with skills that scale off of enemy max HP are going to be huge if you build that champion up properly. Now I want to just show you an example. Coldheart is going to be a champion that does indeed have one of these max HP type scaling skills. So if we go to Coldheart, it's going to end up being her Heartseeker skill. And not only that, but it also has a full turn meter deplete added to it as well. So overall, this is an insane skill, especially for dungeons or areas in the game where the enemies are going to have a lot of HP. So this is really going to be a mid-late game thing. As you get further along in the progress of Raid Shadow Legends, the bosses and enemies that you face will have more and more HP, which is going to make skills like this more powerful because they scale from the amount of HP that the enemies that you have, that the enemies that you're facing have. So the more HP they have, the more damage these skills are going to do. Attacks one enemy, fully depletes the turn meter, has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit, which just makes it a bit easier to gear up for this skill. Damage increases according to enemy max HP. So it's going to scale from enemy max HP as well as just her regular attack. You could end up having this skill hit for well over 1,000,000 damage with the proper buffs, with the proper debuffs, in the right setting, with a boss that has a lot of HP, full crit rate, which is easier because this skill actually has a 30% increased chance of inflicting a critical hit. Overall, an incredibly powerful damage dealing skill that can hit like a truck. So definitely don't underestimate skills that scale off of enemy max HP. So that is going to be number 5. Now, number 6, this is a really simple one, but very, very important, especially for Arena. Obviously, it's going to be important for all aspects of the game, but even more so in Arena, and that's just going to be a strong speed aura. Now, if you end up going to the actual arena, something that you'll probably notice is that most of the champion teams that you're facing are going to have their first champion have a speed aura. So you see your speed aura, not speed aura, not speed aura, speed aura, you know, something like 6 to 7, sometimes 8 out of the 10 teams that you see in an arena lineup, especially as you end up getting to the gold tier, they're going to have a speed aura because they want to go first, and a speed aura is going to be key if you want to go first, especially if you're facing another team that has a speed aura, because now you have to compete with their aura, and it's definitely just kind of the way that the meta of arena works right now. Who knows if it's going to end up changing, but once again, going first in the arena is going to be incredibly powerful, not only because you might end up killing their team right away, but if you allow your enemies to go first, then they get to apply all their buffs and debuffs, and now you just make it more difficult to kill them. It draws the battle out longer. It's just not really the way to go. So a speed aura is going to be super important for the arena, but also very, very powerful in all other aspects of the game as well. You always want to be taking more turns in comparison to the amount of turns that your enemies are facing. Very powerful, but in other aspects of the game, like dungeons, there are other auras that you can end up using in addition to the speed aura. It's not like the only choice, but in arena, it's pretty much going to be the most optimal choice. So definitely a game changer. Plenty of champions have the speed aura, but some of them are going to be much better than others. That's why the game's been having those 10 times rates for, you know, for Gorgrab. I know there was one for Skull Crown as well. A lot of those champions were arena based, and I know that they were promoting that these champions were going to help you get a lot stronger in the arena. All right, let's see here. Strong speed aura, and then the last one on the list is actually a new addition, and this honestly came to mind when Madame Cerise was released, because I realized that one of her skills is just absolutely insanely good, and it's going to be strong 2-in-1 buff debuff skills in one skill, like one built into one skill. And I wanted to show you Madame Cerise as an example and why this is a game changer and why it's so powerful. So if we end up going to the Dark Elves, we go to Madame Cerise. It's this skill right here, Midnight Ritual. Removes all buffs from enemies. Now that's just an added bonus to it right there. That makes the skill go from insanely good to just absolute god tier skill on an epic. Removes all buffs from enemies, places a 50% decreased attack debuff and a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 3 turns. So yes, it has a 6-turn cooldown. However, you can end up lowering this down to a 4-turn cooldown with skill books. It has the strong version of decreased attack. It has the strong version of decreased defense. It also has removes all buffs from enemies, and it lasts for 3 turns. This skill is absolutely insane to have on an epic champion. Now, the reason why I ended up putting this on the list, strong 2-in-1 type buffs and debuffs, is because normally, up until recently, until we've had champions come out with skills like this, a lot of the times, as you've wanted to kind of fill up those roles of applying the strong buffs and debuffs, you needed a separate champion in your roster in order to do so. But now that we're starting to see skills that have these strong 2-in-1 type buffs and debuffs, what that does is that fills up a slot on your roster, and now you can put in another champion that you normally wouldn't be able to, and provide either more damage, extra utility, or something else along those lines. Because now that you have 2 strong buffs or debuffs in one skill on one champion like this, it makes your team a lot more versatile so that you can kind of open it up to other options. So the more champions you have with God type buffs and debuffs like this, the more flexibility you're going to have adding other champions to your roster to be able to conquer the mid and end game. So super powerful. Definitely going to be game changing if you end up finding champions that have skills like this. So That's just a list of 7. Now, I know, like I said at the start of the video, I'm sure there are plenty of things that I've missed out on, but we're already at about 15 minutes, and I wanted to just leave it here. Maybe I'll end up doing a part 2. If you guys think of other skills that you want me to throw in, other game-changing skills in a part 2, feel free to let me know in the comments section, but this is going to be just the first list, or first glance at skills that are going to be massive game changers in Raid Shadow Legends. So I'm hoping this video helped out, especially to those of you guys who are newer. And if you guys enjoyed this video and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Really do appreciate all the support, everyone, so thank you once again. If you want to help out, take a quick quarter of a second to toss a like. It really does mean more than you can even imagine, so thank you to all of you guys who do that. And of course, if you're interested in more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, and all that fun stuff, they should be popping up on the screen right about now, so feel free to check them out. But if not, until next time, have a great day, everyone, and this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.